understand, people believe that, he turns into a supernatural being, and, he flies around as a white hawk, and he's able to see inside of your homes and your most intimate places. So you heard a lot of these things, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you hear any of the predictions that people were mentioning, such as Barack Obama or the world ending or Imam al-Mahdi, any of
Yeah,
these?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That the generation that really got most of that was the one on top of mine, the one that was before mine, the ones that were born in like the '80s and all that.
Hmm.
That is, the early '90s, late '80s. I was born in '96.
Right.
And so those are the ones that really got a lot of the predictions of the world ending and this and that. I didn't really come, you know what I'm saying? I heard a lot about that stuff. And once again, I never, I'm not going to sit here and say that none of it happened, but I never really cared. And, and I just, to me, it didn't make any sense.
So what are the things that they said actually happened?
So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I heard over the years. I wasn't there for the meeting. I wasn't there to see it. And
Right.
one of the things that they're saying is something about splitting the moon, that he split the moon. Listen, I wasn't there for that. So I don't have any, I can't,
And so when you, yeah, so you didn't care. So I think that answers that. You had, I mean, a lot of people looked up to you, and they actually, you had a lot of friends, and you still have a lot of friends in the Jamaat, correct?
Correct.
So at what point, does any of them approach you and, or realize that, you really are at the state of that, you never bought into this?
Well, I mean, I usually was really reserved about a lot of it. There's a couple of times where I spoke out against it a bit, but there was a lot of like backlash from people, my peers, and all that. So I really kept most of my feeling to myself for most of the time. I kept most of how I felt to myself, but they never really. I kind of like disappeared from all the Jamaat stuff. A few years ago. I want to say it's been about almost 10 years now. I think when I was about 17 is when it was the last time I've been up on the land was I was about 17 or 18. And so it's been almost a decade of me being out, and I just slipped out without even saying anything. I just disappeared. So I don't have any contact with any of my friends and all that. I lost complete contact with everyone.
Wow. Okay. That's definitely not Islam, to be separated from your Muslim brethren. Of course,
I didn't
unity.
separate. I didn't separate. I didn't cut nobody off. I'm willing to talk to whomsoever. But I kind of like started focusing on more about my family. My family first is what I've been focusing on. As a matter of fact, as of right now, for the last years, I've been focused on family first.
No, I get it. I definitely understand. But just as a general rule, principal rule, the Muslim Ummah is one body. Staying together is what is our strength, but division is where or why we are where we are right now. I just want to ask you, I don't think that you have any infamiliarities or the term sorcery and sorcerer. You're familiar with these terms, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you find or have you experienced anything that has been along the lines of magic or sorcery while you were in the Jamaat?
For me personally, no. Me, no.
Okay. So when you say you personally and you're specifying personally, what else can you attach onto
Well,
that?
to elaborate on that is, I there's there's a lot of extra stuff that I've heard. This is, word of mouth, I guess. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard some things about capturing jinns and all this other stuff. And I don't really pay attention to none of that, Hafiz. I can't really, I never did, even as a child, I never really paid attention to any of that. But I've heard some stuff. But to witness it firsthand, or to be a part of seeing anything along the lines of sorcery or magic or anything, extra, I can say no for me.
Okay. But do you or would you say and agree that nevertheless the topic at some point was at its peak?
Uh,
Because you
I
mentioned
don't
something
know.
about those who were born in the 80s, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And you also mentioned that they were the ones who had all of these splitting the moon stories, correct?
Yeah, 80s and 80s plus.
Very well. And when you were around these 80s plus, which means that they were probably in their mid 30s or early
Yeah.
30s, they did have conversation pertaining to, as you said, capturing jinns.
Yeah.
Okay, so was this again a conversation or was this a popular topic?
I believe for the most part, I'm gonna go with conversation. It
So
wasn't
it was a hot
certainly.
conversation?
It was no. It wasn't. It wasn't when I was. For me, I've only, it was more of like I would hear it sparingly every so often. It wasn't something that they would talk about every day or even every week. It was something that I would hear come up every so often, like once in a blue moon.
Okay, fair
It was
enough.
more spiritual folk, I guess.
Fair enough. And yeah, the spiritual folk. But I still want to make sure I understand from what you're
Yeah.
saying in the
Yeah.
conversations that came up every once in a while. It was not every week, it was not every day, it was not every month, but every once in
Yeah.
a while it came up. And one of the things that
Yeah.
you said were capturing jinns.
Yeah.
Was how would you you are familiar? I mean, I don't know if you saw the videos about the White Hawk, right?
No, I haven't saw any videos about a white hawk.
Well, on the same, on the channel, we because I don't know if your Abu knows, maybe he does know, but the White Hawk is a reflection or it is a representation of Abdul Qadir Gilani. When you read his Ghawsiya Qasida, you were supposed to travel out of your body with everybody else who's reciting it with you, and you're supposed to travel over all of the seen and the unseen worlds until you reach Lahan Mahun, what have you. And, you'll meet Abdul Qadir Jilani, and you have all of the Ulul Azmi, and you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there. But it's in the Futuhu Muhammadiyah by like you said, Mr. Gilani. He put that in there. And they say that while you're flying across all of the spiritual and unspiritual worlds, you are collecting secrets that you don't disclose. Um, and I'm seeing a correlation between whatever you claim in those secrets and the fact that you use them to captivate or capture jinn. Do you see a connection possibly there?
I'm not really sure because I mean a lot of this stuff is far fetched. Like I said, I never knew about that book or whatever, and I don't like I said I don't really I don't that has nothing to do. I mean I'm just going to say that has nothing to do with me. Like I don't know who was reading that and who was doing that, but I don't want that near me. And as far as the correlation thing, I mean there might be something there, but you're gonna have to ask somebody else because I don't know.
So, and it does sound to me like you really did, you would hear the stories and you would really be like, you didn't care. You would really already had a picture in your mind about what true
Yeah,
Islam was.
yeah.
And,
One ear, it would go in one ear and out the other. You know, a lot of the stuff was a little bit. I mean, I will be honest with you here is that I will tell you that there was he was Shaji was put a little too close to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was put up there a little too high, and I've always believed that. And he was and so I never agreed with how often we would refer to him. We have the best example, and so if you're going to use someone outside of Allah, Allah's work directly, then you would use the best example. And so for me, it was just too much. His name was coming up too much, and then once that happens to me, I just goes in one ear and out the other. So that's why I never really cared because I didn't think that it was right. It was proper. It was Islamic.
And I'm going to ask you just the last thing, and then we're going to wrap it up because the thing is that you mentioned something really important. It only took you to live outside the Jamaat for 4 years around other Muslims.
Yeah.
And once that happened and you came back in, it was like none of this stuff really is true. Even the Sultanate, because this was, but you basically had already your, you know, your mindset. And at that point, did you say like this cannot be real Islam, or you just what did you say under those circumstances?
So when I seen it, and even though it took a while to really understand, because you know you're a child, and so all you really care about is playing or whatever when you're a kid. And so when I started to like realize what was going on, I was in my teenage years. Really, I had to have been about 13 or 12, 13 or 14, and at that moment is when I realized that you know these folk are a little too obsessed with this man. That's the first thing that came to my head. They're a little bit too obsessed with this man, and the community that I was in before this, you know, it was strictly just Allah and His Rasul. There was nothing. There was almost nothing outside of that. And it was a practical Islam. One of the reasons why I know that it was, I don't want to say better or whatever, but I knew that it was right in the other community is because it was a practical Islam. It was very practical. The things that the Muslim people were doing were very practical, and it made sense. And so, yeah, like I said, when I realized what was going on, when I realized that everybody's parents, and not really my parents, but everybody's parents was talking about, you know, Shaji this, Shaji that, and he can do this and do that. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, we had all these prophets, and this man, Allahu Alam, this man is out here outdoing most of them.
Or that they outdoing them, huh?
So I don't. So
What
I
do you
don't
mean
know,
outdoing them? I just need to make sure.
Performing miracles, and you know, performing quote unquote miracles. I never seen them, and you know, just you know, the people, the influence.
The influence that he had. What would you say that influence? Because you did mention psychology earlier.
Yeah.
What? And I don't know. Well, you don't know. It's possible you don't know that this man had a psychology degree. If I gave you an option, yes, he did have a psychology degree because that's also in one of the publications. What would you say if people looked up to him the way that you mentioned with this influence as a result of the psychology expertise possibly applying there, or the result of possible, you know, hex and things of that nature, which again is not too far-fetched considering the fact that you heard about captivating jinn. Captivating jinn is practically, again, dispersing or, you know, dispatching, you know, a jinn into somebody and have them taking over them. So all of that is, you know, is like parallel to each other. So would you say one or the other could have been, or, you know, does that, what would you say to the assertion? That's all.
So on the topic of the psychology, if you had a psychology degree, I'm not trying to make it seem like, you know, he was using or taking advantage of people. That could be, that could not be, whatever. But what I'm saying is, let's entertain the idea that he was using psychology. It would make sense because of the people he chose, the timing, and where they're located. So it would make sense. You know, the psychology thing is like, you know, people who have certain traumas or certain experiences, it's easy to influence or even indoctrinate them if you know that there's a void or there's something that they need or they want to feel. And so, you know, I would say it was along the lines of that, you know.
I would agree with you. Well, Jazakallah. I'm gonna be in touch, inshallah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much. We're gonna be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right. Wa alaikum salam.